Dune is a big book, upwards of 180,000 words. In the copy I read, the story itself was 474 pages, not including the appendices in the back. When structured well, a story can include a lot of ideas in that kind of length, and boy is Dune structured well. I found myself marveling at the perfect positioning of everything in this novel. As the grandfather of modern sci-fi, Dune touches on a lot of areas we've discussed. I'd love to talk about every element of this novel and the ways that Herbert comments on our possible futures and the nature of possibility itself, but I just don't have enough time. In the same vein, I can't give you a plot summary. The events of Dune are ultimately political, and the relationships between characters can often be defined by their interests as much as their emotions. Everybody has their own agenda, and it would be an injustice to give a brief plot summary without going into how the characters drive that plot. I'll tell you what you need to know for the video, but I highly encourage you to read it for yourself. Or watch it. I haven't watched it, but I've heard that the 2021 Dune movie is a pretty good adaptation of the first two-thirds of the novel. I wanted to focus on a particular part of Dune's world-building that truly impressed me. Despite the fact that Dune has been so influential on sci-fi, I personally have never seen any other story try to replicate this concept. A constant throughout the novel is the presence of a secret society known as the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit are a society of women who are trained from a very young age to practice absolute control of the human body and mind, reaching the apex of its capabilities. The alignment of the Bene Gesserit is unclear, as are most factions in Dune, honestly. Members of the Bene Gesserit, aside from one, only appear at the very beginning and end of the novel, but the whole organization casts a shadow over every moment of the story, and it becomes hard to say whether they're a protagonistic or antagonistic force. The principles of the Bene Gesserit are only briefly stated, but they're essentially as follows. They seek to reach the apex of humanity, biologically, as in this world, artificial intelligence and transhuman augmentation is mostly banned. They pursue this goal through intense training and long-term eugenics. During the era of Paul Atreides, the Bene Gesserit have been selectively sending agents to procreate with various men of great genetics for centuries, and our protagonist Paul is the culmination of all they've sought. Any Bene Gesserit has senses sharpened to an extent that we might call supernatural. The ability to see others' micro-expressions, smell the subtlest changes in their environment, control their body to the smallest muscle, and hear, in the words of another, their fundamental flaws, allowing them to exploit those flaws with the voice, a vocal ability that forces one's body to obey a command before their mind can process it. Their goal reaches beyond all of this perfection. While a Bene Gesserit has total awareness of their present, the future is a massively unknown variable, and the Bene Gesserit believes that they can breed a human with the capability to see events before they happen, giving them control over the unknown, and they call him the Kwisatz Haderach. Paul Atreides is the Kwisatz Haderach, and this is known from the beginning of the novel. Through Herbert's structure of his chapters, we know that Paul is the Kwisatz Haderach and that he comes to be known as a prophet. Dune is the story of how Paul gets there. To this point, the Bene Gesserit's interesting, but it's not too special of a secret society. They're like if the social Darwinists were successful and matriarchal. They have massive amount of social clout, both from engineering relationships with people in high places, and the intimidation earned by being a society composed of super soldiers. So what's so special about the Bene Gesserit? Why do I find them so fascinating? To answer that question, we have to fast forward to our protagonist's arrival on Arrakis, the planet known as Dune. Dune is a harsh planet. The entire planet is encompassed by a massive desert. No rain, no bodies of water. It seems actively counter to life. The planet's main value to the rest of the Imperium, which is the Galactic Empire in which all of this takes place, is an addictive drug known formally as melange, but most commonly as spice. This spice is an incredibly valuable export, but it is only found in the deep desert, where massive and extremely deadly sandworms live. As a side note, if you've ever watched a movie or played a video game that has giant sandworms in them, that was more than likely inspired by Dune. Dune made the concept of gigantic sandworms what they are today, though the concept does share resemblance with a creature from Mongolian myths. To obtain this spice without falling prey to the enormous worms, the government and the trade guild do business, though not enthusiastic, with the people who live in the desert, known as the Fremen. The Fremen are known to the government and people off-planet as a pitiful and superstitious people struggling in the depths of the sands, but it's revealed that they're actually extremely competent warriors and tightly united, with religious practices well suited to pack survival in the harsh environment. When Paul's mother, a Bene Gesserit named Jessica, meets an old Fremen woman in the capital city of Arrakis, she identifies something curious about the Fremen superstitions. The old woman asks Jessica if she is a Bene Gesserit, and then asks if Paul is a Lisan al-Gaib. I'm paraphrasing here to make it simple, but that's basically what she asks, and Jessica recognizes this line of questioning. The Bene Gesserit, in addition to engineering over generations the ideal human, seek to keep the status quo stable, and to do so have used multiple methods. At the beginning of the novel, Jessica's superior, the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit, laments that Jessica had a son instead of a daughter, wishing that she could marry that daughter off to a rival to Paul's family and end the conflict that becomes the crux of the story. But the Bene Gesserit don't just sit back and let the world shape itself. What Jessica identifies on Arrakis is the work of another branch of the Bene Gesserit, the Missionaria Protectiva. Centuries ago, when the Fremen were enslaved on another planet, a Bene Gesserit joined them and managed to implant a prophecy into the fusion of Buddhism and Islam practiced by the desperate culture. The stories tell of the Lisan al-Gaib, or voice from the outer world, who would come to the Fremen alongside his mother, a Bene Gesserit. He would be able to see the future, and would know how to lead the Fremen to their freedom and independence. This is the most impressive part of Dune, to me. Herbert takes a look at the inextricable link between religion and authority, and the ways that each one shapes each other. That the Bene Gesserit manufactured a safe haven for future Bene Gesserit into the people of Arrakis is impressive when you first notice it, but it begs the question: how has your religion and your culture been manufactured by authority? How do the people in charge use religion as a way to shape societies into their most convenient form? Dune features a pretty cut-and-dry example, but Herbert based the ideas of his novel on reality. This control over religion gives a level of control over human life that is terrifying. Your values, your standards of right and wrong, of life and death, may exist solely because they're convenient to somebody more powerful. Of course, there is a push to counter this pull. Religion influences the nature and control of authority. In some ways, religion and culture control their authorities. As the third act of Dune begins, Paul has, after a long first two acts, become Muad'Dib, the most respected man among the Fremen and the Messiah who will bring them salvation. He has also awakened his prophetic sight, and is plagued by visions of the Fremen waging holy war on the rest of the galaxy in his name. He notices that, due to the devotion required of the Fremen by their religion, the harsh environment they've mastered in the desert, and the holy fever brought about by the arrival of the Lisan al-Gaib, the Fremen have become the perfect army. Not only are they all veterans of guerrilla warfare against nature itself, but Paul has been trained his whole life not only as a Bene Gesserit super soldier, but also as a strategist and human computer, or Mentat. Herbert doesn't create an entire language like Tolkien, but it feels like he comes close at times, with all the fictional words used throughout Dune. Paul constantly feels this fate as a riptide threatening to pull him in and drown him in violence, and all the while he tries to hold on to the innocent kid he used to be, who was unwilling to kill for any reason. The greatest struggle in the novel is not between two characters, but rather between Paul and the people who revere him, even as they're unaware of the strife they cause him. Like I said before, I'd love to talk more about the novel, and even expand on what I've already talked about, like the narrative role of the Bene Gesserit. Getting into the weeds of a story I love and its world is one of my absolute favorite things to do, and I'd also love to put Herbert's ideas more into the context of our world. As is, all I can show you is that religion and culture are malleable, and that even the greatest of great men fall victim to it, although Herbert would tell you that the phrase great men is a load of worm, dung. As for the outcome of this conflict within Paul, well, that's a spoiler, and I do want you to actually read the book yourself. Even I couldn't tell you the ultimate outcome. Frank Herbert actually wrote 6 Dune books, and the story of Paul Muad'Dib continues beyond the pages of this first novel. For my purposes, though, this is where the story ends. Though, as Herbert once said, there is no ending. It's just the place where you stop the story.